Easter morning, 4:30 a.m. The Pope is dying, and his aides beg him to rest. But instead of retreating, Pope Francis makes a decision that stuns everyone. He will spend his final hours in public, giving everything he has left to the people he serves. This is the dramatic story of Pope Francis's last day on earth. Dawn breaks over St. Peter's Basilica, golden light spilling into the small chapel at Casa Santa Marta. At 7 a.m., Pope Francis celebrates his daily Mass, as he has every morning of his papacy. A handful of staff and guests join him in the pews. Ordinary people he welcomes each morning. The Pope stands at a simple altar, white cassock draped over his slight frame. His voice is soft but steady as he delivers an off-the-cuff homily about hope and humility, speaking of embracing each day as a gift. His words carry a gentle weight this morning, as if some part of him senses time is short. After Mass, Francis lingers to greet each person. He greets each of them with a warm smile and a few kind words. It feels like an ordinary, cheerful morning. But as the last well-wisher departs, a wave of dizziness suddenly washes over him. He grips a marble column to steady himself. A nearby nun steps forward in concern, but Pope Francis straightens up and pats her hand. "Just a little tired," he murmurs with a reassuring smile. The sister hesitates, then nods respectfully as he continues on. He walks to the dining room for breakfast, choosing to eat among others rather than alone in the papal apartments. Sunlight streaks through the windows of the modest cafeteria. This morning, he sips some orange juice and nibbles a piece of toast. Simple fare to start his day. His personal secretary, Father Gonzalo, joins him quietly with a folder of documents. Francis glances at the papers between bites, but his gaze drifts out the window to St. Peter's Square, where early visitors are gathering. Sensing the Pope's distraction, Father Gonzalo gently reminds him, "Holy Father, the doctor did advise rest." Francis places a hand over the priest's and replies softly, "The Lord will give me the strength I need today." His eyes shine with resolve. The Pope rises from the table, leaving his half-finished juice behind. Though a faint ache lingers in his body, he carries on. Outside, the morning sun climbs higher in the April sky. Pope Francis heads to his office, unaware of how precious each remaining hour truly is. Mid-morning finds Pope Francis at the desk in his simple study. Sunbeams slant through the window as he pores over a stack of mail. He insists on reading letters from ordinary people each day, believing their voices keep him grounded as a shepherd. A mother overseas begs prayers for her sick child. A prisoner seeks forgiveness. A homeless man thanks him for extending charity. Francis pauses and presses a hand to his heart, whispering a prayer for each of them. Their pleas and gratitude reaffirm his deepest calling. Even as his own body grows frail, his compassion for his flock remains strong. Outside, through the open window, he hears faint sounds of pilgrims gathering in St. Peter's Square. It is nearly noon on Sunday, time for the traditional Angelus blessing. Advisors have quietly prepared to cancel it, thinking the Pope too weak today. Francis sets the letters aside and glances toward the square. He can imagine the thousands of faithful waiting under the sun, hoping for a glimpse of their pastor. He recalls Jesus' charge to Peter, "Feed my sheep." His heart quickens with purpose, even as his limbs feel heavy. Drawing a steady breath, Pope Francis decides he will not hide away from them. Against all caution, he rises from his chair, determination overriding dizziness. He reaches for his white cassock and zucchetto and calls for Father Gonzalo to assist him. In minutes, he will face the world once more. One last mission of love on the horizon. Noon arrives, and the bronze bells of St. Peter's Basilica toll across the square. To the astonishment of the gathered crowd, Pope Francis does not appear from a distant window as expected. Instead, he emerges at ground level in his open-topped Pope-mobile. A wave of elation sweeps through the throng of thousands. Despite his weakened health, Francis has come out among his people. He signals the driver to proceed slowly along the barricades. Pilgrims reach out, and he extends his hand in return, offering blessings with a trembling yet determined hand. At the foot of the basilica's steps, Pope Francis is handed a microphone. The square falls silent. His voice cracks and wavers as he speaks. A brief greeting, gratitude for their presence, a plea for peace in the world's conflicts. Each sentence is labored. Twice he pauses to catch his breath, a painful cough echoing through the speakers. Aides step forward anxiously, but Francis raises his free hand. He will finish. Summoning every last reserve, he delivers a final blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and please pray for me. The crowd murmurs, Amen, as he makes the sign of the cross over them. As the applause swells, the Pope manages a weary smile and a last wave. But upon turning away, his strength finally gives out. Father Gonzalo and a security guard lunge to support him as his knees buckle on the platform. A nurse rushes in with a portable oxygen tube. Francis's face has gone pale as marble. He gasps for air, chest heaving from the exertion. The nurse slips a breathing tube under his nose. For a few tense moments, the Pope's eyes flutter closed as the world holds its breath. Finally, he takes a steadier breath. Those nearest to him release a sigh of relief. By early afternoon, Pope Francis is back inside Santa Marta. Stubbornly, he tries to carry on with his routine, even sitting in the dining hall for lunch. He offers a grateful smile to those around him, but barely touches his food. Francis musters a few kind words to thank the staff, but fatigue presses heavily upon him now. At last, aides gently wheel him back toward his room. Pope Francis closes his eyes and whispers a prayer under his breath. He has poured out nearly every ounce of his strength this afternoon, and the day is only half done. Night falls over Vatican City. After a few hours of fitful rest, Pope Francis awakens in his dimly lit room. The events of the day weigh on him. His body is exhausted, but his soul is at peace. He knows he has given all he could. At his desk, he opens his breviary and finds a worn letter from his grandmother Rosa. Written decades ago, her words about trusting God and suffering still bring a faint smile to his face. With trembling hand, he begins to write a short farewell prayer, thanking God, asking forgiveness, and blessing everyone he has served. He pours his heart onto the page, but halfway through the note his strength fails and the pen slips from his fingers. Soon after, Father Gonzalo finds the Pope slumped over the desk, fast asleep beside the unfinished note. Gently, he rouses him and helps him into bed. Before lying down, Francis takes the letter from the homeless man he read that morning. In one last familiar gesture, he tucks the folded paper beneath his beloved statue of a sleeping Saint Joseph, entrusting that soul and all his cares to God. The attending nurse slips the oxygen tube under his nose to help him breathe. Francis is too weary to protest. Lying back on his pillow, he traces the sign of the cross over himself. In the darkness, he whispers a final prayer. Into your hands, O Lord. His eyelids grow heavy. Outside his window, the lights of Rome twinkle as midnight approaches. The Pope sleeps in gentle silence, not knowing that dawn will not find him in this world. The early morning hours are eerily still. Around 4 a.m., Pope Francis stirs awake from a restless sleep. Sensing the nearness of daybreak, and perhaps something more, he gently presses the call button by his bed. The night nurse appears at his side in moments. In a faint voice, Francis asks to be taken to the chapel. Though alarmed, the nurse nods and carefully helps him into a wheelchair. A few minutes later, they arrive in the dark chapel down the hall, lit only by the small sanctuary lamp. The nurse steps back as Pope Francis insists on kneeling at the prie-dieu. With great effort, he lowers himself down. In silence, Pope Francis prays in the presence of the Eucharist. His lips move soundlessly. Only God hears his final prayer. After a few minutes, the nurse notices his breathing growing ragged and gently approaches. "Holy Father," she whispers. He opens his eyes and gives a tiny nod. It is time. The nurse summons Father Gonzalo and the Vatican doctor, who arrive within minutes. Together, they lift the weakened Pope back into his wheelchair and escort him to his room. Dawn's first light seeps through the curtains. Laid back in bed, Pope Francis gazes at the crucifix in his hand. Father Gonzalo begins to quietly recite prayers for the dying, his voice trembling. The Pope's fingers tighten once around the small wooden crucifix. With his last ounce of strength, he raises it to his lips and kisses Christ's face. A single tear rolls down his cheek. Around 7:30 a.m., as the bells of Rome ring in the new day, Pope Francis draws a final shallow breath. His hand falls limp on his chest, still clutching the cross. The nurse leans in, feeling for a pulse that is no longer there. A profound hush falls over the room. In the soft dawn light, the Pope's eyes gently close, and his earthly journey comes to its peaceful end. A life in service now complete. When news of Pope Francis's passing was announced that morning, millions around the world fell into grief. He died at 7:35 a.m., and the day he had just lived exemplified everything he stood for. In those final 24 hours, he prayed with unwavering faith, cared for others with selfless love, and spent himself completely in service. Those by his side recall a profound peace in his last moments. A shepherd who gave all for his flock. He met his end as he lived, with compassion, humility, and courage until his very last breath.